Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to Stately Vaughan Manor, where, just a really quick video today because I don't have a lot of time, but this is something that I did want to talk about really quick, and that is the invasion of these censors, these sensitivity censors, which seem to have descended on some classic books recently. You've doubtless heard about it all over on BookTube or read about it if you're into books. You've probably heard about this, first with Dahl's work, and then with Ian Fleming and James Bond, and now apparently Agatha Christie. They are all being edited, or have been edited, by sensitivity readers, censors, sensitivity censors, who have altered the texts to change things and to take out some offensive references or words. In James Bond, for example, I think it was the N word that they took out of a couple books and replaced it with black or blacks or something like that. I'm not exactly sure, but from what I hear, it's something like that. And recently, it's been announced that Agatha Christie, they're doing the same thing with Agatha Christie's work, where they're removing some anti-Semitic language that was in the books. And this is not a good thing. It's not a good thing. Now, you will hear people, and I've heard people on BookTube just say, oh, it's not such a big deal. It's not, it is a big deal. This is a big deal. Because these are not just stories for entertainment anymore. These are historical documents as well, these books. They were written for entertainment, but they were written a long time ago for entertainment. And so they are going to have some of the attitudes and the prejudices of the times in the books. And that's important. It's important that that stuff is recorded. I remember when I was in school and I was a little kid in school and first learning about slavery in class. And it was terrifying. I mean, the stuff we were hearing as kids was just horrifying stuff and shocking, and we're just like, what the hell? You know, it was one of the first times that I can remember when I really realized just how awful people could be to each other, which was disheartening. And the teacher saw this from our reactions when he was talking to us about slavery. And it was like, don't worry, this is all in the past. Now, everybody's equal. Everybody's equal under the law. Equality is everywhere. Everybody's, it's all fine now. Slavery is just a thing of the past, and now everybody's level playing field. It's all good now. And it's like, oh, thank goodness that crazy racism is just in the past. Well, I learned different pretty quickly, but some people have never learned. And you have people today who, when they're confronted by racism, which some people have never experienced, people on the paler side like myself, and they're shocked when they see examples of racism in our society today. And you saw this back when that Trump was elected, and then you had crazy racists with tiki torches marching around, and people were like, what the hell? Where did all this racism come from? Well, let me tell you, it's always been around, and it's a lot easier to understand the racism and prejudice and xenophobia and sexism that permeates our society today if you know how bad it was in the past. And as bad as it is now, in the past it was really, really, really bad. To the extent society was so racist and so sexist and so xenophobic that not only did average people just carry around these racist ideas, but they were accepted. And you could have people write sexist or racist things in books aimed at entertainment, and it was just, it was just an accepted thing. It didn't, people just weren't surprised at all by it, because that's the world people were living in. So you would have otherwise, just decent people, but they grew up in a racist environment, and so they have racist ideas. And those type of ideas, they take a long time in society to get rid of or to change. Change is difficult. And so it's a lot easier to understand why things are the way they are now if we know how they were in the past. And literature from the past, popular literature, just books and stories that were written for entertainment, that gives us a window into the ideas of the past and the attitudes of people, the attitudes of average people living at the time, people who would be reading this stuff and writing this stuff. So if you alter these things, it gives us a skewed version, it gives us a skewed idea of reality. It's harder for us to know how things were if you change things like this. And that's a bad thing. Now, I'm not surprised that this happens, particularly with these books. All of these books that I'm talking about are books that are popular still and are being read nowadays for entertainment. And the publishers who are publishing these books want the cash to keep coming in, right? So they don't want to offend anybody and get people to stop buying these series or these books. And so, yeah, they change these things in the texts because their goal, the publisher's goal, is to continue making money for as long as they can from these books. I mean, James Bond is a huge franchise still. Agatha Christie is still a best-selling author whose books are regularly made into films. So it's no surprise that censors would target these works because the publishers want to continue raking in the dough on these for as long as possible. And like I said, you will have people defend this practice. And one of the things they'll say is like, well, this kind of thing has always been happening. Well, that is true. I have an example of it right here on my shelf. One of my very favorite authors in the world is Edgar Rice Burroughs. And this happened to Edgar Rice Burroughs. Again, this happened after he passed away. His work was altered by others. This is another thing. Altering an author's work after they have passed away is just morally wrong. It is. You can say, and I've heard said, well, these works belong to the public now. The author gave them. That doesn't mean you can go around changing this person's work. No. An author's work or an artist's work is the work of that artist. And changing it after they have passed is just wrong. I mean, it just is. And here, in this book, in the introduction, you have this. The texts, this is for the texts in this book, the texts are based on the 1960s editions, which were revised by the Burroughs family to ameliorate some of the more overtly colonial attitudes informing the first editions. Still, the true essence of Tarzan, the lord of the jungle, the noble savage, the protector of the weak, remains as strong as ever. So yeah, in the 1960s, the texts of the Tarzan novels, some of them were changed after Burroughs had passed away. It was actually done by the publishers of the Tarzan novels, and the Burroughs family just said, fine. Basically what they did, there were some characters in the Tarzan novels who used the N-word. And that was the change that is most identifiable. That didn't happen much in the Tarzan books. And Tarzan himself and most of the good guys, they wouldn't say things like that, but the villains did. And so that was changed, just like it was changed most recently in the James Bond novels. So yes, this has happened in the past. It's probably happened a lot more often than we know, and we just, back in the olden days, before the internet, it was harder to identify changes like that. Now, I don't know all of the changes that were made at the time in the 1960s because I don't have access to the original editions on a lot of those books. I have some of them, and I have seen that change, where the N-word was changed to blacks, I think. Again, it was because they wanted to make money as long as they could on this franchise. The Tarzan was huge. They wanted to not offend people and just keep selling as many books as they could. And they figured, yeah, what the heck, no one's going to care. But it makes a difference now, because now these books are really, really old. Tarzan no longer as popular as he once was. And these books are more than just entertainment now. It's important to know the attitudes of Burroughs and his readers at the time that these were originally written, and what was accepted and what wasn't. Like I said, these are historical documents that reflect the society that produced them. And it's harder to know what Burroughs actually wrote and what was changed unless you have access to his original editions, and those are harder to access. This could happen in the future as well. I mean, think about some of the popular authors of today and move ahead 70 years. What was going to happen to Stephen King? Think about it. The insidiousness of this is not just that it's happened in the past. That doesn't make it right that this happened before. The thing is that now it seems to be becoming common practice. I mean, they just keep doing it with different authors from the past who still sell. And that could make a difference in the future, because it's going to, people who are going to study this literature are going to have a harder time knowing what was the original text, what wasn't, what was changed, what wasn't changed. And in the future, 60 or 70 years, what's going to happen to, say, Stephen King? Stephen King, let's just take the original edition of The Stand, which had some stuff that, it was written in the 1970s. It reflects the time it was written in and some of the attitudes at the time. There are some dodgy moments as far as, racism are concerned in that book. Stuff that you would think would be written differently today. And this is just from the 1970s. Well, if changing texts after an author passes away is common practice, in 70 or 80 years, the publishers of whoever publishes Stephen King, because he'll probably still be published, his name will still be a big name. He'll just be a classic author, of horror stories. And some publisher might say, well, let's just change that stuff. And let's just take out that stuff. If it becomes just a commonly accepted practice that people are just like, whatever about, that could happen. And it will become more difficult to know what Stephen King's attitude in the 1970s actually was and what he was actually writing. This could happen to any author who passes away and whose works are being published eventually just by a publisher. Who knows how involved the family will be of Stephen King in 70 or 80 years. I don't think this would happen. If Stephen King passed away now, his kids wouldn't allow this to happen, I don't think. But what happens with the grandchildren or the great-grandchildren? Who knows what's going to happen in the future with texts that are written now. It's a problem. And it's a bad thing. It's bad. It's a bad thing. That's all I have to say about it, I think. I gotta go to work. Okay, guys, I will catch you next time.